Disability doesn't mean that we're broken. Disability doesn't mean that we need to be fixed. Disability doesn't mean that we need to hide who we are. But I think that when I became disabled at 9, it was 1997. It was a different time. And even now, as I think about how much more people in the Asian American community are being more transparent about mental health and intergenerational trauma, so many of us who are millennials or Gen Z are expressing compassion for our parents' generation that it was a different time.
The Self-Hype Podcast.
What is up, y'all? Welcome to the Self-Hype Podcast. This week is a special one because we have a really great guest. Her name is Tiffany Yu, and she is an award-winning social impact entrepreneur, disability advocate, and content creator. She's the founder and CEO of Diversability, a social enterprise aiming to elevate disability pride and build disability power. And having her starting her career at Goldman Sachs, Bloomberg, and Revolt, she is now an in-demand corporate speaker and creating an approachable bridge in corporate diversity, equity, and inclusion spaces. Not only that, she is an author, the Anti-Ableist Manifesto, which we unpack, which is really a beautiful story because it starts from a TikTok series that went viral. That is really about, examining disability and creating an inclusivity and accessible world. So we talk about that. We talk about her upbringing. We talk about how she faces adversity and creating joy and really owning who she is. And we talk a little bit dating as well. So excited for y'all to get to meet her. And this is a good one. Let's jump into it. Hi. What's up, Tiffany?
Hi, Eli. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you doing?
Remind me, how did we meet? Was it through Trending Up or something else?
It was trending up. I mean, we saw briefly, but yeah, I saw you doing your thing. It was such a fun event. Yeah, there's so many people and everything else, but yeah, you were really a standout with everything that you're advocating for and everything else. So I followed you after, and I was like, oh my God, she is so driven. She's doing such beautiful, amazing work. It's so incredible to see. I was like, I have to interview her at some point. And so thank you for being here. And
Of course.
really appreciate it. There's so much to unpack here because, like, just learning more about you, I'm so curious on just your story, your drive, like you making the decision to dedicate to your life, to spend so much time of your life to help others so they can be seen in obvious a way that you could be empathetic for because you personally been through it. But I'm curious, like could you take us back to like audience listening to you? Where did all this start? Like before we built Diversability, before we had the book, before we had like all these amazing. Yeah. How did this really origin story start for you?
So that was a good first question. I guess the best way to explain it, and I'll share it in one sentence, and then I'm happy to dive deeper, is that the why behind my work is 9-year-old Tiffany. And for those who are listening to this who are not familiar with my story, I was involved in a car accident when I was 9 over Thanksgiving weekend where my dad was driving. He unfortunately passed away, and I acquired a handful of disabilities and injuries, including permanently paralyzing one of my arms. I'd be diagnosed with PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder, which is a type of mental health disability. And I had also broken a couple bones in one of my legs, so I was a temporary wheelchair user for about 4 months during my rehabilitation period. And I just think about how alone and isolated I felt in my experience. Not only did I not know any other 9-year-olds who had lost a parent, maybe some were going through a divorce or some other I had no mirrors, I think is the best way to explain it. And I was also one of a few Asian families where I grew up in Maryland suburbia. And so talk about mirrors in so many different aspects of my identity. But that aloneness, I think really, and I use the phrase that exclusion became the fuel to my fire. And it wasn't until I got to college that I really, I described college as like a playground for growth. I joined a bunch of different clubs. I was trying to figure out what my major was, what I wanted to do for internships, or how I wanted to start my career. And so, interestingly, in Taiwanese American club. And what I will share about that is that I actually didn't identify as Taiwanese or Asian until I was 18. Again, there were no mirrors, so I had no one, as we're recording this, I'm wearing red because it's the Lunar New Year and red is good luck. But I just grew up never talking that aspect of my identity. And with my parents being immigrants, I think they also viewed assimilation as our pathway to success. So unfortunately, I don't speak any other languages than English, neither do my 3 siblings. So but creating the Taiwanese American Club in college gave me pride, identity, empowerment, history, culture, and a part of my identity that I never thought about before. And so fast forward a couple years after that, what I knew how to do was start clubs. And I said, I did this for my Taiwanese identity. Could I do this for my disability identity? And again, up until that particular point in time, now I'm 21, I hadn't identified as disabled, but I had been for over 10 years. So that was kind of the genesis of all of that. And I think that, as I look, and that was 2009. So as I look back at the past 17 years, what continues to motivate me is seeing us win, seeing transformation happen, not only from people who are disabled who feel loud and proud or are movers and shakers in this community to try to make things better for all of us, but maybe even people like you or your listeners who aren't disabled, who meet some of us who really change the trajectory of how we're viewed through your eyes. And you can bring those into spaces that we're not in.
That's incredible. And what is like, because I was reading your bio and there's so many achievements that you could literally stop halfway and that's a successful career. And then it goes even further in such a deep, emotional, personal way. And I really see your drive from just early stages of your career, even in your childhood. Like you being in college and facing an identity that is true to you that you didn't grow up with and creating the freaking club. That says so much about who you are and your character in the most beautiful way, and I love that it transcended into all these different areas. Because I'm so empathetic of that because I grew up really nerdy, and but I grew up in like really like South Side Chicago, a lot of like rough neighborhood. But I like just listen to indie music and skateboarded and stuff. So like I didn't feel connected to my Latin identity because my great grandmother instilled the American, you can't speak Spanish, you can't do that, you have to speak English, you have to be American. So I feel you on such a deep level of that pathway of being proud of where you come from, even though maybe you didn't have that reflection. So that's so dope that you challenged those parts and like created something, and then it took it even further. So that's amazing to hear. And I think that's the biggest thing as well is like the whole like disability space, because what I'm curious about is you had this traumatic experience, and losing your father and having this disability, but you didn't see yourself as that. And I'm very curious why knowing that you carried it for so long.
Mm. I think it goes back to what I had internalized around society's view of what it meant to be disabled. And this is so much of my work now, right? Is that a lot of the unlearning that we're doing now is that disability doesn't mean less than.
Yeah.
Though ableism as a system of oppression does make us less than, or does create systems and, infiltrates. Disability doesn't mean that we're broken. Disability doesn't mean that we need to be fixed. Disability doesn't mean that we need to hide who we are. But I think that when I became disabled at 9, it was 1997. It was a different time. And even now, as I think about how much more people in the Asian American community are being more transparent about mental health and intergenerational trauma, so many of us who are millennials or Gen Z are expressing compassion for our parents' generation that it was a different time. Even as a woman in the workplace, my parents' generation, it was a different time. A lot of us, even with the Me Too movement, are so unapologetic now about how we want to be respected and treated with dignity. So I think because I had no role models, or at least most of the narratives that I saw in the media were about if you were disabled, your life was tragic. just simply by existing. I want a caveat, and this is where I think we have a hard time making space for nuance. But I do agree, and you use this language, that how I became disabled was traumatic, was tragic, but my existence now is not, right? And so can we sit in both of those spaces? But yeah, it was either we're super sad all the time because our lives are forever doomed, or we are superheroes and have to overachieve. I guess we're essentially objectified to say the only role you play in life is to inspire other people. And I guess so much of my work and so much of what I wanted to do was kind of sit in that in between. Because even with Diversability, which again started as a student club, people would come to me and they'd be like, "Oh, are you advocating for healthcare or education or employment?" And I said, first, we need people to support us. Because I actually didn't find my voice as a disability advocate until I started this community. I didn't know what the things were that I wanted to care about, but I knew I had to start a club, right? Uh, and I guess the other thing I'll say too is, as you read that highlight reel that is my bio, none of this happens in a vacuum. The only reason I started the Taiwanese American Club or co-founded it is because I met someone during freshman orientation who told me that her mom was from Taiwan and we're always looking for points of connection. So I told her my dad was from Taiwan, and I made this offhand remark. I said, we should start a club. And she was one who actually ran with it. So she led that and I supported her, right? And so together we became the co-founders and we had a co-founding team. And then as it came to Diversability, here is a beautiful display of solidarity. Jackie is the person I met freshman orientation. She was then my roommate senior year. So together, we had kind of gone through college all together doing our Taiwanese American stuff. And senior year, I told her I wanted to start a disability club, and she was so encouraging. And then she was like, I'll be a part of your club. I don't share your disability identity. And then even Diversability's first logo for the first 10 plus years was created by my little buddy in the Taiwanese American Club. So if you were an upperclassman, you were a big buddy, and then freshman, sophomore, you had a little buddy. And so Wei Yin, that's his name, we always give credit where credit is due. He just did that because he cared about me, and so I just love these examples of solidarity where, like, even though when we first started Diversability, I didn't know who would be co-founding this with me, but I could at least bring along some cheerleaders who were willing to come show up and support in any way they could because they cared about who I am. And that's where I think real allyship, that to me is the root of it, is like, I care about you as a human being. And I want to show up with you, even if I can't fully empathize with what you're experiencing in your body.
That is such an amazing story. And I love how that all came to be. And it shows, yeah, because you would assume like, oh, you have to have a disability in order to be a part of this, which in its inception was allyship in action. Because we hear about all the time. I'm like, okay, there's awareness. But what is in addition to that? Like,
Yeah.
what is a working society where allyship is in motion? And I love that was the inception of Diversability. And I'm curious, like, as that is the inception, like, how has that like manifested and progressed in different ways, not only for obviously, people in the disability community, but also in allyship, like making allyship engaged. So from such humble beginnings, which is so freaking cool to hear, because I see everything y'all are doing now. Like, what was that growth like, and how did you guys kind of know where to set initiatives and where have those initiatives have gone?
Yeah, I will say we're kind of in what I call Diversability 3.0. So 1.0 was Student Club at Georgetown University. 2.0 was circa 2015, so a little over 10 years ago. I was working in finance in New York, and previously, up until that point, I had always really been actively involved in whatever my company's disability employee resource group was. So I became curious that if you're not in college and you don't have a student club, or you don't work at a big company that has employee resource groups, where do you go to find community? So I said, I kind of want to create Diversability as like the disability employee resource group that exists outside of a company. And I was working at a startup at this time. And so I went onto Twitter and I found a couple people who had in their bio or something that they were in New York and worked in the disability space. And I grabbed coffee with both of them. And Liz, who was one person I met with, she was like, Tiffany, it sounds like you're kind of creating like a meetup group for disabled people. And if you were around 10 years ago, meetup.com was very popular. It's still around now, but when I mention it to like Gen Z people, they're not as familiar because now there's like Luma and Partyful and so many other event platforms. So that became 2.0, which is we started in New York. And I am someone who like if we're thinking about startup mode, we're looking for product market fit. And this, I think, is what my contribution to this space is like I bring this business lens. To me, it's like the business of disability inclusion. And so what ended up happening was I said, I'm gonna organize one event, and if people show up, then there's a need for this. But if not, at least I tried. And we ended up selling out. It was like 70 people in a co-working space downtown. And the commissioner for the mayor's office for people with disabilities was there too. And after the event, a bunch of attendees came to me and they said, oh, like, when's the next event? Like, what's next? Because I think during that time, and now in 2026, it's a lot different. There are so many places you can go to find disability events and disability community. But in 2009, when I started Diversability, in 2015 with 2.0, there really wasn't. So fast forward a couple of months, I get an email from the New York Public Library. And they had offered, some of their space to us for free to host some of our events. And they go, hey, Tiffany, I've been seeing some of the events that you've been hosting with Diversability, like really great community gatherings. Could we hire you to curate a couple disabled speakers to talk about their experiences navigating the library environment for a staff awareness training? And they had created the market for me, which is, up until this point, Eventbrite or Meetup, we were just charging a nominal fee to cover, pizza and snacks. And now we had the New York Library coming to us saying, hey, we see value in disability lived experience. Can we hire you to curate? So we actually were able to negotiate our speakers' rates up. We took, a commission similar to how a speakers bureau does it. And we realized, oh, we can do something like this. I will say, given the current environment that we're in, we're not seeing as much of an appetite for that as we once had, but we were getting, speaking engagements and other opportunities for our community members in the $8,000, $12,000, $15,000 range. So this, and even for people listening who are thinking about doing speaking, like it's definitely a range. And I do my fair share of what I like to call like pro and low bono gigs too for community orgs and other things. So that was 2.0, and we were kind of running on 2.0, which is the other part of 2.0 was now that we had built this community, we would actually have media outlets come to us who were looking for specific quotes. So we were able to get, maybe our community members featured in Business Insider or the Wall Street Journal, and that felt kind of cool too, because that's another way you can build your thought leadership. So 3.0 came in 2020. Up until that particular point in time, we were pretty much just operating as a bunch of different hyper-local chapters because I had heard this neuroscientist say that the best way to challenge any type of bias is through real-life continuous experiences with people who challenge your stereotypes.
Oh, I love that.
Right? But they have to be real life continuous experiences. Now, I don't want to diminish that being online is also real life. And so I'm now making a distinction between in person versus IRL in real life. And in real life can be both virtual and in person. But for me, I had thought it was mainly in person because you just are able to get a little bit deeper. We may be having this conversation now, but maybe there's an internet lag or who knows. So real life continuous experiences. You meet someone at a Diversability event, then you maybe stay in touch, or even if you don't, you see them again at the next Diversability event. And I like to say that frequency creates familiarity, creates community and trust. So continuous real life experiences, you're coming to the events, you're building that frequency, you're starting to get to know people as who they are, not just, oh, that's a person with a disability, right? You're getting to know all facets of who they are. So fast forward to 3.0. 3.0 is the start of the pandemic. We had primarily been in person. And we were lucky enough to get to join Meta's Community Accelerator program, which was really focused on helping Facebook groups grow. So not only did we grow 4 times during the start of the pandemic in 2020, which showed me how desperate people were for community and social connection during that time. And I lived by myself. I didn't join the Zoom dance parties, but I would definitely do like one-on-one FaceTime or find other ways to connect, right, to keep that. But we grew 4 times, but we ended up winning what they called like demo day. And so in aggregate, we received over $50,000 to invest in the growth of our community. What I'm really proud of is that at least 75% of that went to hiring disabled contractors. We redid our branding, we rebuilt our site, we rebuilt our site with accessibility from the ground up. But then we used some of that money to launch a membership community, which is focused on advocates and leaders who want to take it to the next level. So essentially kind of the speaking and the press stuff that I'd mentioned earlier in 2.0, we're bringing that a more curated version of that within our membership community. And so if I look back at this whole trajectory, I know I've been talking a lot.
Yeah.
The through line has been when I didn't see any disabled speakers, I started events so that they could speak at them. And then when I didn't see community spaces for disabled people to meet each other, I created that. And then one other thing we created, which is I couldn't find a list anywhere that really celebrated disability leadership on a global level. Now, there is something called the Disability Power 100 in the UK, but that's just the UK. And so we created what we call the D30 Disability Impact List, which is a nomination process which celebrates disability leadership. And again, it's that amplification. And what's so fascinating is even through that, we are sometimes writing like letters of confirmation for people globally who are using the D30 to, like apply for other things to validate their work and their legitimacy as an advocate and the impact of their work. So that's kind of where we are. But I also just want to caveat that Tiffany has also grown. So I like to say that the umbrella over everything I do is disability advocacy, and Diversability as a community and events and membership platform is just one pillar of that. And then I've got like my education platform, which is about allies. And then we have our economic empowerment platform, which is about awarding microgrants and reinvesting money back into the disability community. And then another pillar that's kind of civic engagement and serving on advisory boards. And then a last pillar I just added called joy, which is how do we find sustainability in this work by finding the things that I love to do for me.
Oh, I'm so happy that ended with the joy. It's so incredibly crucial and key. That is incredible. I mean, hearing all this and receiving all this, it sounds like a silly question, but I'm just so fascinated by the work that you've done and the drive behind it. I'm like, why, Tiffany? Why are you the way you are? Like, where does that come from? Like to not to see a space where it is needed and to jump in and to create it time and time and time again. And
Yeah.
several pillars. That's where it's remarkable. Where does that come from, you think?
I took a quiz. I'm really into quizzes. I took a quiz, and this quiz tells you what your top values are. And it's backed by science. And I wish I could remember off the top of my head what the quiz is. Oh, it's called Via Character Strengths.
Okay.
If you want to take the quiz, and it's free, they don't pay me. But, whenever you do like a values exercise, they give you a list of words and you go through and circle them. But then I'm like, I don't actually know if those are my values. So this quiz takes like 7 overarching virtues and then breaks it down into, I think, like 24 top strengths. And one of my top strengths is called judgment, but I actually, which sits under the virtue of justice. And so I wonder if part of me just feels injustice so viscerally. Maybe to a fault. But I also, and I actually don't know if this is a trauma response or not, but if I have an idea, I think I'm going to try to do whatever I can to make it happen. And I know I shared the story of Diversability, and it actually wasn't that easy to get it off the ground.
Mm.
And there was another initiative that I launched a couple years ago. We launched an endowment fund at Georgetown to invest in disability initiatives. And that was pretty difficult to get off the ground too. And so I think part of it is knowing that I'm part of a larger movement, but then also trying to see if I can do whatever I can to make an impact in the world. And you brushed a little bit about the topic of allies. Can I share a quick acronym with you?
Sure.
I share this in my book. So I think chapter 33 of my book, The Anti-Ableist Manifesto, is called Advocate with Us, Not for Us. And it talks about the ways that non-disabled people can join us as advocates. And I share this acronym paused, although in the hardcover, it was PAPUSD. And then I said, no one's going to remember that. But I will share what paused means.
Yeah, please break it all down. I love it.
But paused, the P stands for platform. And then the A is amplify. The U is use your privilege. The S is share your story. So you may not be disabled, but maybe now you know Tiffany. So share your story from your perspective. Don't co-opt mine, but just share, our relationship together. So that was S. And then E is engage with partners, and D is decenter yourself. And of course, if you get the book, I go and I have like little paragraphs for each one of those. But that's just a high level way for allies to really think about, here is how you can more meaningfully show up for us.
Yeah, that's incredible. And that's what was so exciting. First off, the copy's on its way, and I'm so excited to get it. I can't wait for it. I'm tracking it by the day. But yeah, Anti-Ableist Manifesto is when did what was kind of the origin story of that book? And again, allyship is a part of it, is a big part of it. What made you want to, again, not that this is another pillar, but create this book to be able to give to others to digest? What did you want them to know, and what was that process of creating it?
Yeah. So the book fits under the education pillar. Everything fits into my little all the pillars. But really the inspiration behind it, I mean, this book is for people who are newer to the disability community, who want to show up better for us, but don't know where to start. And the genesis of it is actually inspired by a social media series I have called the Anti-Ableism series. That is a series I started in December of 2020 because people were coming to me and they were like, oh, like, how can I show up better for you? And this is during a moment where I think DEI was having a moment, diversity, equity, and inclusion. It was in the wake of George Floyd's murder and the resurgence of Black Lives Matter. And as we think about those movements, what does intersectionality look like as well, right? And how do we think about the liberation and the amplification of all of our communities together in support of each other? So I started this series mainly, in answer to that question, but also to keep me more accountable to have consistent content because, we're content creators.
It's true. Yeah.
But interestingly enough, a couple months after I started that series, a literary agent reached out to me and asked if I had thought about writing a book. And 17-year-old Tiffany in high school thought maybe I'd write a book. I'm now trying to remember what age I was in 2021. 2021 version of Tiffany was like, I have too much on my plate. But it was just so serendipitous. It was kind of like, I'm a big believer. There's this quote in The Alchemist that says that like the universe conspires in your favor. And it just so happened that a couple months after the literary agent reached out, he's like, I want to rep you. Shout out to Charles. But in some ways in my mind, I was like, good luck, because, putting together a book proposal seems like a lot of work and time that I don't have. But a couple months after that, a publisher reached out directly to me saying, hey, I've seen some of what you're posting. Have you thought about writing a book? And I said, oh, let me put you in touch with my literary agent. And also what you are hoping that this book is going to be about is actually how I help fund our nonprofit, how I help fund Diversability, which is going out and doing corporate talks around disability in the workplace or disability allyship. And so that became the beginning of the book proposal. And I feel so grateful. Do you have any aspirations to write a book?
I fun fact, I literally posted on Monday because that's like my think tank day, and I have it on my board. I'm like, I want to.
Yeah.
Like, I literally posted like, is anyone published, self-published that I could speak with? And it's crazy that we're having this conversation this week.
Yeah. And I will say, and maybe this could be a good opportunity for you. I was a guest on a podcast years ago called You Should Write a Book About That. And this is before anything with the book conspired, but I wonder if maybe being on that podcast. And then she came to my LA book launch, and I remember signing in her book. I wrote a book about that, or signing.
Love that. We gotta
But
make-
I ended up getting something called a preempt, which means that the proposal wasn't totally finished, but the publisher liked the idea enough that they wanted to buy it before anyone else could take a look at it. And that was November 11th, if you're into angel numbers, 11/11/2022. So, and then the book came out in October 2024. And as we're recording this, the book is also going to come out in paperback later this year, October 13th, 2026. And that's where so Eli will get the hardback that has the PAPUSD acronym, which I'm hoping they will let me update to paused. Because if you think about paused, like even the word pause is like such a good word even for allyship too. It's just, let's pause for a second, you know?
That's such a good like way to think about it with the pause, because that even in that it's like, how can I serve, how can I help, pause, ooh, let me stop and listen, and then just even listen to what those acronyms mean. So that's a great reframe. I'm excited. Oh, I got like an exclusive edition, but it's free before I got shifted. That's so remarkable. Well, again, it's so incredible to see, how the universe works, and you being in this position and just driven by like, passion and advocacy, wanting to care for others and have them be seen based on what you've gone through as well. And it's great that people see that, and it's growing in this way. So like, what are you most excited for this book in terms of that allyship? Like, I guess in terms of, and that can kind of feed into future, a 4.0 of what does Diversability look like in terms of engaging that allyship, and how can we learn more, and what does society look like ideally? Because a lot of us like don't know. We're like, hey, good, you guys are great. Yeah, I support, or whatever. I see you, but what does that society look like? What is the idealism that what we're striving for that would make us all feel seen and heard and valued?
Yeah, I'll answer that question first, which to me is, I share an experience in the book where shared meals are very anxiety inducing for me as someone with a paralyzed arm. Especially if it's a buffet line, trying to carry my plate, trying to serve myself, then getting, a chicken or a meat dish or something and trying to cut it, or deciding not to get it because I can't cut it. The ideal is that I can say, I have a paralyzed arm. Could you ask the kitchen if they could cut it before it comes out? Or, hey, I'm going to be wearing these over-the-ear headphones because I need them to do my best work. And nobody cares. Like, nobody cares in a respectful way. And so that could also be, maybe a blind person at a sports game who is using, they're now making these like tactile boards where you can feel where the ball is. I don't know if you've seen some of that, but like maybe a blind spectator is at a sports game and they're using, I think it's called One Board, but don't quote me on that. I think there are two companies that do it too, but they're using that, and they can enjoy the game the same way as everyone else.
Right.
And so at a baseline level, I guess what I'm trying to get at is, I want to enjoy my meal, I want to do my work, I want to go to the sports game the same way as anyone else would have if you didn't have a body or mind that works differently. Or maybe you are the type of person who, in the middle of the meeting, or in the middle, if you're overstimulated or something, if you get up and you walk out and go to a quiet space, you don't feel like a burden on anyone. So I think, to me, that is the ideal. And I will say that I am growing more confident in my own self-advocacy to ask for and advocate for those things. But I also know that that's a journey. So if we can be in relationship with each other where it's proactive and respectful on both sides, then I think that's the dream. What you were talking about with the dream for the book, I mean, the fascinating part, the book has been out for a year and a half as we're recording this. It has been fascinating to see this book take on a life of its own. So many book clubs. I mean, the hardback, which you are going to get, is now on its 5th printing. And that to me shows that people are interested and curious, and luckily the content is digestible and approachable enough that if you are, and then again, I guess my takeaway is that no matter who you are, there is some action that you can take in whatever sphere of influence you're in. For 4.0, I'm actually looking at 4.0 more broadly as Tiffany as a human being. And I think kind of what you mentioned earlier on is you can look at this, I call it like the LinkedIn highlight reel. I feel very held as an advocate. And I think I want to spend more time on that joy pillar, on exploring the things where I'm not asked to have a hot take on what's going on in the world. Or maybe I don't. And in full transparency, I'm in a little bit of a softer mental health time of my life right now. And how can I also, make space for those tender parts? Because sometimes I feel like as an advocate, I have to show up really hard all the time, right? And so where are those safe spaces or those softer spaces? And maybe Diversability is one of them, but I am grateful to be in community. But I am curious, like who, now that Diversability is in, we're still growing, but we feel very like small business growth. We feel steady, and maybe approaching maturity. But yeah, what does it look like to take care of me? I think that's my 4.0.
I cannot tell you how happy I am that you said that. Because like I do personal wellness coaching, and I see so much passion and drive and care, and also you're a human being, right? So I love that pillar of joy of like, and and I hear that because another question I had for you was like, how did you personally grow as all of this grew, or what did you learn about yourself through this process? And what is so incredible is there was this like driven young person building clubs in college to creating whole movements and having people feel seen and loved and heard. And I love that through that process, you are checking in with you and like, what do I need and what does joy feel? And that can be safe. It can be safe to be in stillness, and that still matters, and that feels enough. And making that feel like a home, which is so incredible. And it shows how much work you've done in terms of helping other people's lives, but also for you. So like hearing that joy is so incredible because people could hear you and say, oh, I have to just go and do and build and all this. But there's also you. You're a part, you're a priority too. Your happiness is a priority too. Your sustainability is a part of it too. So it's thank you so much for sharing that because it's so incredible.
Of course. I mean, I will share one thing I am excited about. I recently signed up for the Los Angeles Half Marathon.
Okay.
And I've been reflecting. So I've been reflecting because after I became disabled, my most traumatizing memories were gym class. I hated getting dressed. I hated when they had to pick teams because no one wanted me to be there. My mom made me hand a note to the PE teacher every year explaining my disability. I use no words. This is just how I felt at that time. And then when I was in high school, I thought maybe I would join my high school's track and field team. And the warm up was to run a mile. And I remember huffing and puffing after that warm, and I quit that same day. So that was a little over 20 years ago. And so again, kind of like universe conspiring, I was kind of just like online looking at stuff. And I came across the LA Marathon, which, as we're recording this, is happening in less than 3 weeks. And I'm not a runner. Uh, but um but I noticed that you could get a bib. So it's really hard to get a bib for some of these marathons and half marathons, but you could get a bib if you fundraise for a charity. So I picked one that focuses on addiction recovery. And for people who are not aware, within the disability community, we have a higher prevalence of addiction rates. And I think even for people who have traumatic brain injuries, it's as high as 50%. Um, and if you think about, opioids or pain or the things we need to use, it can be a pathway or social isolation. So, and addiction, alcohol addiction and substance use disorder are disabilities as well. Um, so I decided to fundraise for them, and the team is it's a sober running team. And they're really supportive. But I guess I'm just reflecting on how 20 years ago I could barely run a mile and I just quit. I didn't even try again. And then here I am in 2026 in this almost 40-year-old body. I got onto a treadmill for the first time like 3 days ago. And I know we may have feelings about ChatGPT, but I asked ChatGPT, I said, could I do a half marathon could I train for a half marathon in 3 weeks? And they said, if you can run without stopping, even if it's super slow for 3 minutes, you will be okay. And my goal is completion, not time. And so wish me luck, I guess I'll say. But I'm excited because even as I share about like my own mental health stuff, I was like on the treadmill 2 days ago and I was like, ooh, this feels good. Like I've been like up in the middle of the night overthinking and, all this stuff. And later today, I'm going to get back on the treadmill. And it was like when you're running, and I never thought about, and I know there are runners who are so into it and they have done multiple marathons and they try to sell you on it. But figure out what your menu of mental health support looks like. I'm restarting therapy as well. I am so grateful I have friends and community and other places I can turn to. But for me, this is part of my exploration of the menu. And it just so happens that not only am I running and I'm finding it beneficial for my mental health, but having this goal of completing this half marathon is keeping me motivated enough to continue to show up even when it's hard.
That is such a beautiful full circle story and inner child healing. Like what you're doing is adding so much beautiful intention around something that's so like running. Like running could be just, oh, I'm just gonna go for a run, whatever. Like you have a story to you. There's adversity that you're facing. There's a fear that's associated that you're facing. And I love that you're running for a cause that aligns with passions and it's drive now. It's me doing something for others, thus, oh, I got to get on this damn treadmill now. But also, it's a byproduct of me facing this fear or facing this adversity, but also being proud of myself. So that's incredible and this is something I think everyone could take on is if it's building a group or a movement or writing a book or even just going on the treadmill and running, it can mean something. And I love that you are creating that for you in a way that feels aligned and healthy and loved. Oh, it's so I'm so damn proud of you, Tiffany. You're so cool. I'm like,
I will say I went to this I think it was like a TED speaker or something, and they were talking about happiness.
yeah.
And, I think happiness is something we are all striving for. And one of the things they mentioned is that those of us who do have meaning in our lives tend to be happier. I mean, one other one is, having access to community and healthy relationships and social connection. But when I heard that, it felt validating that I feel like I'm a person with depth. And sometimes I feel like it's too much. But it's reminding me that it is adding meaning to so many different parts of my life and enriching it in a way that makes it exciting. Uh, so I hope that, in a couple weeks I will have whatever that photo is of me, I don't know, biting my medal or kissing it.
Just manifest it. Yes, it's
Uh,
happening. I love it.
but it's terrifying. And I will say that some of that stuff, like I did a triathlon a couple years ago, and that one was just a sprint one. But to help train for it, I did a 20-mile bike ride. And I will say for both of those, I didn't really tell anyone about them because I thought I would fail. But I'm also realizing that learning and living out loud can be that mirror to so many people who just didn't think that it was for them. And the coolest part when I signed up for the half marathon was they had, they were like, what type of runner are you? And one was para athlete, and then one was wheelchair racer, and they even posted on the LA Marathon site, like, oh, like we're welcoming all of our para athletes, they're sponsored by this group. And I'm like, I mean, talk about the world that I want to live in, right? That I can just go sign up and mark myself as a para athlete, and we get our own like little tent or whatever. But like there wasn't any friction because they know that we as disabled people exist in all spaces, including the LA Marathon.
I love it. Oh, that makes it's so incredible to acknowledge that happiness and that joy factor and really just and sometimes in order to find that is the fear. Sometimes it's finding those areas and that's what growth is this scares me. There's a story that's here, but it's also I don't want to live with this. So you get to be this hero in your own story of there's this adversity there. I'm going to run headfirst and go through it. And I love that you're sharing so openly with this process because that vulnerability is inspiring. That's making me think, man, I got to get my ass to do jujitsu again because I've been lazy as hell. Yeah, I'm like, I need to get on it. It's like, and your depth is your greatest asset. And I love that you're creating a healthy relationship between you and your life because that depth has helped so many people, like leaders like you. There's a lot of shallow leaders, I'm sure you probably know, that are in spaces, but people with depth, there's this deeper emotional weight that's carried. And it goes back to kind of what we were talking about in the beginning. And it's, coming from humble beginnings, coming from, being people of color, immigrant families, what have you, like there's this additional personal wellness journey of rest and just being present and being proud of yourself that our ancestors didn't have the privilege to experience. And so I love when you do get that damn medal and you're biting and you're throwing it around like a rope or something. It's going to be that moment for you. And not only for you, but everyone that came before you. And you've already done so much remarkable work, but I love that this is you getting that. Just going to be so incredible. Okay, I have to ask this question, and it's such a good segue because I give it to all my guests. All right, if you could go in a time machine and you could go back to any age and you could only share one piece of advice, one statement, one nugget, what would that age be and what would you say to that younger version?
Well, I am going to have to say 9-year-old Tiffany. What would I say to her? And I actually dedicated my book to 9-year-old Tiffany, and the line I used was, I can't wait to see who you become. I can't wait for you to see who you become. But I think the nugget I would tell her is, I don't know, like you wouldn't even believe the life that you're going to live. Like I use the word awe a lot, AWE, when I think about 9-year-old Tiffany. It's the day after her dad's birthday. It's Thanksgiving weekend. Her life has been changed. And sometimes when I watch old videos of myself, my first TEDx talk is kind of like the most detailed version of the car accident. I cry. And I can't believe that she is me and that I am her. And she would be so proud, but I also feel sad that she had to experience how alone she felt for so long.
I love that. There's this dual appreciation of like, I love that I was you. I love that I am you. And that's looking at that 9-year-old and saying, you're so incredibly powerful of what you're going to get through and go through and how lonely you're feeling. And I'm so blessed to be able to come from you. And that vice versa is so powerful. in terms of that? Because we talk about our inner childs, and yeah, they're kids, but man, that's her spirit state. There's something deep there. There's like young version of you that was so driven and passionate based on what she's gone through, and it's so incredibly powerful. So I appreciate you sharing that with me, and that is so remarkable. And woo, it hits different when you bite into that metal. I'm telling you, it's you, the 10-year-old version, 12-year-old version, 21-year-old version. Everyone's gonna be biting that metal in that moment. So I'm gonna be stalking you up a storm, looking at space and seeing how it all goes. But with that said, any lasting words that you want to give the audience in terms of advocacy or anything we talked about, or just anything that comes to mind, before we wrap up.
Yeah, it was interesting. I thought your show was about, like, dating and relationships, so I was, like, coming in ready. Um,
Yeah, yeah. Typically, it's like I kind of naturally just go where it goes, and I'm generally curious about the people I talk to. So, yeah. So I was like, "How do you work? Where is that? What's an inner child?"
I guess what I was reflecting on as I was thinking about us recording our episode was just how much work I've done to feel whole in myself and just who I am as a person, how I'm showing up in the world and acting with integrity. And that anything else, whether it's romantic partnership or friends or community, or all the people I'll meet, is all extra credit. And I think that unlearning of tying my worth to external factors, even though it's all there, in the first half of the bio, as you were mentioning,
Yeah.
uh, that took a lot of work. And I think that that is a lot of what fuels what I call approaching all of this with heart.
Mm, I love that. Wow, that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. I mean, I guess I have to ask, any nuggets for people that are in the disability community navigating love and dating relationships and all that? I don't know, like, just gonna do a quick one around that one since we didn't get to hit on it.
I will say I have done 2 longer podcast episodes specifically around dating with a disability, but, one is for the Dateable podcast, and then I think the other one is called Disability Dating and Relationships, like, very, very clear title. But what I will share as I think I, like, listened or revisited those conversations was that, it's always the question of, like, how much do I share around my disability or not? And it makes me think back to how if I ask the kitchen to cut my steak,
Mm.
it's pragmatic. If I think it's a big deal, it will come off as a big deal. If I don't think it's a big deal, but it's just information, that's how it'll be shared. And I guess my learning was that the things that we feel insecure about, that could be our disability, it could be our height, it could be our age, so many different, and dating it's just so vulnerable. But those things that we feel insecure about, they become amplified as we enter the dating field. And so again, I guess I come back to that like heart work or feeling just very centered and whole in yourself, and that anything else feels like extra credit. Uh, I continue to remind myself of as I go out into the dating field. And I also have to acknowledge, I, in full transparency, I don't know if I fully love who shows up in dating. I get very anxious. Um, and that's some of the work I'm working on as well. And actually, one thing, even with the example of the marathon, I'm just so grateful that even as a 37-year-old, I am still learning and growing and discovering new parts of myself and finding meaning in all of that. And that anxiety, which, I don't like that it shows up, but it's there because once upon a time it protected me, right? So how can I just continue to learn and grow and appreciate that journey of becoming the better and best version of myself?
You are so cool. Oh my god, that is so. All right, we're definitely I'm gonna find those 2 episodes, and we're gonna put it in the show notes on top of everything else in terms of the book, in terms of more about you and how we can engage with you, because I think, yeah, those are incredible topics, and I love that you're facing those spaces in your own personal life, thus building your confidence and feeling like, okay, I can be in these uncomfortable spaces, and acknowledging the protective of that inner child wounds and everything that comes with you. And now unpacking that and healing that and creating joy in that. Oh my goodness, I'm so excited for 4.0. Now I'm not even talking about the Diversability. I'm so excited for that. Oh my goodness. Okay. So with that said, yeah, the links will be in the show notes, but real quick, like your IG, anything you want to shout out in terms of links directly that people are hearing it and they're inspired and they want to follow right now, wherever we can find you?
Yeah, so my website is tiffanyyu.com, and if you go there, you'll find all of my social links, but I'm Tiffany Yu across social media. And then if you want to follow Diversability, and one thing that's actually interesting about Diversability, even as we think about paused, is I'm pretty decentered on Diversability, right? It's really about uplifting our community and hosting community events. So if you want to follow more like community disability work, even learn about kind of what's going on from a policy perspective. Sometimes we'll create educational guides or share research. You can go to Diversability's website, which is mydiversibility.com, or at Diversability across social channels. And no matter who you are, disabled or non-disabled, we have a free Facebook group that anyone can join. So if you just want to be witness to the conversations that we're having to better equip yourself to know about the disability perspective in the different spaces that you're in, you can join our Facebook group at Diversability.
Fantastic. Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much, Tiffany, for being on the pod. I appreciate it. I really appreciate the time, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey, y'all, I want to give another shout out to the amazing Tiffany Yu for being such an incredible guest on this week's episode of the Self-Hype Podcast. This is the cool thing what I love about this podcast is that when I find guests, I genuinely am so curious about them as people. And obviously, I want to share their message. And I think she created such a beautiful deep dive in terms of the world of people living with disabilities, how people could support and how could we create a better future where we're all seen and we're all seen as equals and also supporting each other in action. So, but there's also the person. And I love that we got there in terms of her sharing who she is on a deep emotional level. So I'm so proud of this show. I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of my guests. I'm so proud of Tiffany. Oh my gosh. We had such an amazing conversation even after. So if you guys want to learn about her, if you guys want to get her book, links in the show notes, definitely check her out. She has such amazing content. She's such an inspiration. An inspiration of, yes, what she advocates for and who she is as a person. And that's what's really dope. And outside of that, you guys are amazing. Thanks for hanging out with me. Thanks for vibing. And if there's any guests that you really want, if there's any topics you want to hit on, by all means, shoot me a DM. I'm pretty open and chill. I'm not like super distant. I see this community and I see the people that listen and follow. So just know that this episode was a great one, and you're great, and we're all great. And I love what you did with your hair, and you're super cute, and your ex's breath stinks. Okay, see you next week.
The Self-Hype Podcast.